So here's the argument. Right? If you're concerned about animal welfare, and of course, according to these people, you should be, and we'll talk about why you should be in a little while. But if you're an expert about animal welfare, should you eat beef or should you eat chicken? Now, here's the logic. The average cow is big and makes about 405,000 calories of beef. The average chicken is small and makes about 3,000 calories of chicken. You'll get more numbers today about chicken versus beef than you could have ever imagined and ever want to know. So if you eat the US average of 250,000 calories of meat per year, you either eat half a cow, which is truly amazing. If I think of all the steaks I eat and all the beef generally that I eat, and at the end of the day, I've only eaten in a whole year half a cow, just that was worth the article, just that knowledge. I only ate half a cow. It's half a cow. But if you eat, instead of cows, if you just eat chicken for the year, you eat 80 chickens. Again, that seems too little. I think I like 8 a chicken today. Maybe I only eat half a chicken. So in one alternative, if you eat beef, you eat half a cow. If you eat chickens, you eat 80 chickens. But this is the moral point now. If each animal raised in order to feed you suffers, then the chicken, right, eating chicken exposes 160 times more animals to suffering than eating beef. So if your goal in life is to minimize suffering in the world, and by the way, this is the altruist will tell you, the modern altruist, the kind of secular altruist, the scientific altruist, the Peter Singer altruist, will tell you the goal in life is to minimize suffering. Then suffering. And you shouldn't limit yourself to human beings. The goal should be to eliminate suffering on planet Earth. Plants, as far as we know, don't suffer. Animals do. So you do the calculation. And by switching to chicken, you cause, one of 160 less suffering in the world. Right. But there's a counter argument to this. What if a cow is more conscious than a chicken? Right? You could expect this because cows have a lot more neurons. They have a lot more, nerves. Cows have 6 times the cortical neurons as chickens. And most people think of them, just as 10 times more morally valuable, I don't know what that even means, than chickens. So if we massively round up and think of a cow as morally equivalent to 20 chickens, then switching from an all chicken diet to an all beef diet saves 60 chicken equivalent per year. Right? Because now you're basically, every cow, so your half cow is worth 10 chickens. So you're comparing 10 chickens to 80 chickens, not half a cow to 80 chickens. Right? So by going all beef, you save 60 chickens. Still, less suffering in the world. So the conclusion here is you should eat beef. You should eat beef because beef saves suffering in the universe. You should minimize your chicken intake. Now, but there's a problem now. Jesus, I mean, once you go down this rabbit hole, there are problems upon problems upon problems because you can't only consider short-term suffering. You have to now take into account global warming. Cows produce methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas. Chickens don't. Now, how does this affect your calculation? So you've got, if you want to minimize suffering, you eat beef. But wait a minute. Beef also emits more methane, which increases global warming, which hurts the planet. So according to a study, chickens produce about 2 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per 1,000 calories of meat. And cows, about 10 kilograms. You can see the science here, right? So to the average person who eats 250,000 calories of meat per year, the person who eats all beef is producing 2,500 kilograms of CO2 per year. The person who eats all chicken is producing 500 kilograms of CO2 per year. Well, Shazbat says the planet doesn't have any neurons. That's true. But all the beings that are getting hurt by, go along with me here, guys. You have to play along. This is, it's not the planet that's going to suffer. It's all the beings, including human beings. They're going to suffer and are going to be pained by global warming, right? So 2,500 kilograms of CO2 per year versus 500 kilograms of CO2 per year. Now, how much does this change things? Now, the average U.S. citizen produces 17.5 tons of CO2 per year. I think I do more than that. Well, no, because now I'm in Puerto Rico. I don't drive as much, but I fly a lot. And I fly business class, which supposedly consumes more CO2 than economy class. So I probably produce a lot more than 17.5 tons. But anyway, suppose that the average person was originally eating half beef, half chicken, in which case they would get 1,250 kilograms CO2 from beef plus 250 kilograms from chicken equals 1.4 tons from beef plus 0 point something, I don't know, tons from chicken, which leaves 15.8 tons coming from other things like cars and plane rides. So if this average person switched to eating only chicken, their yearly CO2 production would drop from 17.5 tons to 16.4. Wow, you'd save a whole ton. If they switched to eating only beef, their yearly CO2 production would rise from 17.5 to 18.6. Not good, guys. Killing the planet. So the CO2 difference between all beef and all chicken diet is 16.4 tons of CO2 yearly versus 18.6 tons yearly, or about 10%. You can see how complicated this gets. It's trying to be scientific. It's trying to take altruism and make it scientific so you can measure your impact that causes suffering in the world. And you can trade that off versus things you can do to reduce suffering in the world. We'll get to the reduction of suffering in a little while. So switching from okay, we talked about that. So you could reduce 10% of your carbon footprint by switching to all chickens. So more chickens suffer. There's more suffering in the world, but there's also less CO2 consumption. So how do we weigh the CO2 consumption versus the chicken? Now, what's the CO2 worth? Right? What's the CO2 worth? So nobody can agree, surprisingly, on what it costs to offset a ton of carbon. One site said it's 10 cents per ton to $44.8 per ton. So from 10 cents to $44, that's a pretty big range. But let's settle, somebody settles on $3.3 per ton. Maybe it's between 4 and 13. I mean, different sources. Okay. Who knows, right? So can we offset the carbon cost of going from an all chicken diet to an all beef diet? Right? if you did that, it would cost you about $22 a year. So you could pay $22 to offset the cost, the increased CO2 that you're causing by eating beef. So this seems like a really cool solution. You can eat only beef, therefore reducing suffering in the world, and then pay $22 a year to offset the increased carbon that your increased beef consumption has caused. You see? Life is simple. So you'd be saving 60 chickens, less suffering, offsetting your carbon footprint. This would be good, right? But, you know, and this is where they start getting really complicated. Because you can also offset animal suffering. So you can eat the chickens, causing a lot of suffering in the world, but then you could spend money saving animals. For example, there are many charities that make the claim that you can pay them and they'll reduce suffering of animals. Right? A lot of effective altruistic organizations have done research, and they suggest that the cost of saving one chicken is $6. So if you want to go from all beef diet to an all chicken diet to prevent global warming, you could offset the 60 extra chickens of suffering by paying $360. So imagine a standard American eating half beef, half chicken. This is all from the AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca. This is all from Astrocodex 10, right? So the average American eating half beef, half chicken might offset the cost of the chicken he eats with $180 to effective animal suffering charities, and offset the cost of the beef he eats with $11 to effective carbon offset charities. And if he wanted to switch to all beef, he would owe an extra $11, all chicken an extra $180. And you can see now how all this works. So he comes to the conclusion ultimately that if you're going to do the offsets, then you might as well eat whatever is most delicious to you and then offset the damage by doing these offset stuffs. Anyway, you can see the brain damage that this stuff causes, all because of an assumption. An assumption and wanting to take morality seriously. What is morality for these people? Morality is the reduction of suffering. The reduction of suffering globally. We'll get to human beings in a little bit. If the reduction of suffering is globally, then you have to take that seriously. What suffers? Well, animals suffer when we eat them, when we slaughter them for food. And human beings suffer. How do you weight animal suffering versus human being suffering? I'm sure there are entire academic papers devoted to trying to figure that, not in scientific journals, but probably in philosophy journals, trying to figure that out. And then trying to tell you how much of your money should be dedicated to helping human beings versus how many of your money should be dedicated to helping animals versus how much of your money should be dedicated to stopping global warming versus how much of your money should be dedicated to stopping other forms of catastrophe, global catastrophe. And this is basically the whole idea behind the effective altruism movement. And this is a movement, and this is not a small movement. And this is a very influential movement. A movement, as I said, that was inspired by Peter Singer. Peter Singer's, wrote a book What was the book? No, it was a 1972 article. 1972 article, sorry. Very influential. That basically takes altruism seriously and tries to show people that even though they give to charity, even though they pay their taxes, even though they volunteer maybe at soup kitchens and maybe even go to Africa with the Peace Corps or whatever, they're not taking their altruism seriously. Now, the nice thing about effective altruism is they understand what altruism means. Altruism means the placing of the well-being of every human being on the planet equally, at least according to effective altruism, equally with you. That is, so every human being, every life is valuable. For effective altruism, every life is equally valuable, including your own. So what you cannot do, and this goes back to altruism, what you cannot do is weight your life as more important than other people's lives. This is Kant, this is also Christianity, and they're very much inspired by Christianity. Life is valuable. And maybe animal life is less valuable, but animal life, therefore animal suffering, is still important. And you must weight it. Let's say a cow is half a human being or a quarter of a human being. It needs to be weighted as well. And your purpose in life, and here they take from the utilitarians, the altruists, who are trying to figure out, okay, I know I should sacrifice. I know I should help others. I know my life should be focused on helping others, but how do I decide whom to help? How do I decide what causes to support? How do I decide how to help people? Well, the utilitarians tell you the way to do it is by maximizing effectiveness. But how do I measure it? And how do I determine which life is worth more? So the effective altruists say, we're going to use science to determine these things. But let's start with the idea that human beings are all worth the same. Your child is worth the same, morally, as a stranger in Africa, as a kid in Africa. And you must, I mean, a lot of people think altruism is a myth, that nobody actually is altruistic, nobody acts altruistically, that altruism is not in the world. This is a great example of that it is. And effective altruism says we're going to use science, we're going to use math, we're going to use algorithms to figure out how you should be altruistic. That is how you can live, so you make enough money to live, but then how you can take everything above and beyond that and give it so it maximizes well-being or minimizes suffering in the world out there. And by minimizing suffering, we're maximizing well-being. Now, as I said, this was all inspired by a 1972 article by Peter Singer, which I've talked about in the past on a show. And here's the story that here's the argument Peter Singer makes in this article. You're walking, I guess it's a shallow pond. I thought it was a river. You're walking next to a shallow pond. You're wearing nice clothes. Maybe you're going to a job interview. Maybe you're going to work. But you're wearing a $500 suit, let's say. Nice shoes, nice clothes. And you notice a child droning in the pond. Now, saving the child is not a threat to your life because it's a shallow pond. But it would ruin your clothes. Beyond dry cleaning. I mean, you'd have to buy new shoes. There goes the, I don't know, $200 pair of shoes. Probably ruin part of the suit, if not the entire suit. There goes the $500. So in a sense, you are, I mean, it's not as silly as the trolley questions. I think this is better in terms of thinking it through, right? So are you, in a sense, everybody would agree that in this emergency situation, you would walk into the pond and save the child. I mean, even Ayn Rand would say, and she has a ethics of emergencies, this is an emergency. There's a child there. Your benevolence, your positive attitude towards human life and human beings, you're not risking your life. You're not risking any harm to yourself. There's some monetary damage. You're probably going to be willing, almost anybody is willing to suffer the monetary damage in order to save the child from the pond. And Peter Singer says, yeah, almost anybody would do it. But he says, there's a child in the pond every single day. Every single day. There's a child dying in Africa. And instead of buying the nice suit, you took the money and you sent it to Africa, you could save that child. Why are you willing to do it when he's right in front of you and not do it when the child is in Africa? Why are you not willing to use the same money you would give up, in a sense, by saving the child right here, instead of save and give it to Africa to save the child over there? Indeed, one of the big things that effective altruism is against is local charity. They say $1 is far more effective in Africa than it is in the United States. Charity spent in the United States is far less, quote, effective than charity spent in Africa. You can save many more lives, reduce much more poverty, reduce much more suffering if you use your charity in Africa than if you do it in the United States. I mean, I've made this argument about Bill Gates forever. The reason he spends his charity, his poverty-reducing charity in Africa rather than in Seattle is for these reasons, for these effective altruism reasons. He's affected by the effective altruism argument. It's not the government's responsibility. It's not the government's responsibility to save children from starvation. It's not government's responsibility to save kids from ponds. It's your moral responsibility, the altruist would say. Moral obligation. So Peter Singer says, if you value children, if you claim you value children, then you should be sending your money to Africa. Now, what would an objectivist say to that? Because we would agree that we would probably go into the pond and save the child. Right? Then, what if there's a child in the pond every day? Then you would stop saving them. If the norm is children dying, drowning in ponds, then you're not going to keep giving up $500 to you. I mean, somebody should look into why children are drowning in the ponds. What's the cause of that? What's causing famines? What's causing starvation? What's causing death in Africa? But your moral obligation is not to save every child every day in a pond who's drowning, even if on one occasion you would do it. But Peter Singer assumes altruism, and he assumes everybody agrees with altruism. And he's just trying to make it clear to people that they're being hypocrites. If they're truly altruistic, what they truly should be doing is sending their money overseas. Now, just to give you a sense of the impact of the influence of effective altruism and Peter Singer, Facebook co-founder Dustin Moskovich and his wife incorporated teaching into their foundation, Good Ventures, which is giving away most of their multi-billion-dollar fortune. Bill Gates wrote a blurb for one of Peter Singer's books. As I said, that's why he's in Africa. Elon Musk spoke at an effective altruism conference. Vox, the news site, has an effective altruism section. In Silicon Valley, this is incredibly popular. There are hundreds of effective altruism chapters all over the world. And people take this seriously. You know, there's one story I found in the Washington Post. A couple, where do they live? In Maryland, Greenbelt, Maryland. They give $49,000 a year to charity. And charities that are focused on the things that reduce suffering the most, far away. That's 27% of their combined salary. 27% of their combined salary they give away. Now, the husband is an engineer at NASA, at the Goddard Space Flight Center, right? He works on devices that look for signs of life in Mars and Saturn. And he says that he constantly is taking on more challenges at work in an effort to make more money. Not so he can make his life with his wife better, not so they can fund more vacations with their kids, not to save for retirement, but so he can donate more money to the charities. The Oxford professor who started the effective altruism movement and established a whole center at Oxford University, his name is William McCaskill. He's a philosophy professor. He says if you're a one-person U.S. household earning more than $58,000, you're in the top 1% in the world. You're super rich. And the fact is that a dollar means far more to the less fortunate than to you. Therefore, you should be donating a large percentage of your income because that's the way, that's what altruism demands. And effective altruism figures out which charities are going to effectively use your dollar the best, which causes are going to maximize reduction of suffering. Right? They have three big projects: extreme poverty, reducing extreme poverty; animal suffering, reducing animal suffering; and long-term threats to human survival. It is interesting that they don't consider climate change one of the bigger long-term threats to human survival. Maybe because they're trying to be rational in their altruism. And they realize that money spent on climate change is money not spent on other things that actually influence human life much more. So they're trying to be effective in their altruistic endeavors. Right? So for example, they've done this calculation. It turns out that if you donate $2,300 to a malaria consortium that provides anti-malarial drugs to children in Africa, you will save one life. $2,300 saves one life. That's the kind of math that they do, the kind of math I did with the chickens and beef. This is the kind of stuff that these people do constantly. There are groups that get together and talk about this. One of the things that they emphasize is how privileged we are to have been born. This one guy says that he's an engineer. He says, I consider myself one of the luckiest people who ever lived because of the country I was born in and the family I was born into. He's a nuclear engineer. He's 33 years old. I mean, he's really unlucky because imagine being born 500 years from now when we're a gazillion times richer and living forever. We're so unlucky to be born now and not 500 years from now. I mean, the whole idea of even thinking in those terms is silly. So one guy who they interviewed in this article, he's 32 years old, and a few years ago he retired. He's into one of these financial independent, retire early. So he saved enough money. He lives frugally. He's a software engineer. And he retired in a small condo in Madison, Wisconsin. But then he realized that he really wanted to help other people. He wanted to fulfill his altruistic moral obligation. And he started volunteering. But it didn't seem very effective and a good use of his time. So then he came across effective altruism, and he realized that what he really should do, and this is why Silicon Valley loves this, what he really should do is go and make money so he could give it away. So now he's got a job in Washington, D.C., working in software engineering. He's planning to donate $75,000, I think, a year. 45% of his adjusted gross income every year, he's going to donate. 45%. 45%. Now, you see, this is one of the things effective altruism says. You think that working in a sweat kitchen helps? You think that spending a year in Africa helps? Nah. If you're a high-skilled, high-talented, high-earning individual, the best thing you could do for the cause, the best thing you can do morally, is go work really, really hard, make lots and lots of money, and then give it all away. Now, productive, creative, millennials love this. I get to do my job. I get to challenge myself. I get to work hard. I get to make a lot of money. And as long as I give a certain percentage of it away, I'm cool. I don't have to go to Africa. God forbid I go to Africa. So it's ideal for Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who can still build their dream company, and they can be, quote, moral as long as they give it all away. Effective altruists, many effective altruists earn money so they can donate. All right, let's see. What else is interesting? So one example, they say, existing animal charity is misplaced. For every one animal in an animal shelter, a lot of donations go to animal shelters, right? To go to shelters. But for every one animal that's euthanized in a shelter in the United States, approximately 6,428 farmed land animals are slaughtered for meat. So what you should really do is stop eating beef and chicken. Also, we should care about people in the future. Many more people are going to live in the future than live today. Therefore, we should be willing to sacrifice today for the future. The biggest risk, according to some in the effective altruism movement, the biggest risk to humanity in the future is not climate change. The chances of climate change being catastrophic, according to, this senior research fellow in philosophy at Oxford, is 1 in 1,000. But the chances that artificial intelligence, we are told, will destroy humanity is 1 in 10. So you should fight artificial intelligence, I guess. Peter Singer, on the other hand, doesn't like this. He says, we can only control what we have today. Forget about tomorrow. Let's just alleviate poverty today. They're very critical of standard philanthropy. For example, think you're a good person for donating a few $1,000s to a wealthy university or art museum? Maybe. But that means one life in Africa that won't be saved. One? Oh, a few thousand, 2,300, right? Someone who donates $40,000 to train a guide dog for a blind person. You think that's generous? Sure. But as Peter Singer notes, for that amount, you could help several hundred blind people in a developed country get the surgery that could make them see. So people obsess too much about what? About things close to them. Why do people obsess about things close to them? Because they're self-interested. Because the things that are close to them have resonance with them. The things that are close to them impact their lives. The things that are close to them, they can actually see the results. The things that are close to them are in some way potentially self-interesting. That's not good. We obsess way too much with the things that are close to us. For example, Peter Singer was very critical of people who spend extra money ordering food during COVID from local restaurants, hoping to help local businesses. Instead, you could have sent that money to Africa and saved kids from dying of malaria. Someone half around the world is just as important as your children. Never mind the neighbor's children. Never mind the restaurateur's children. And your dollar would go a lot further in Africa than here. All right, so note, these people take altruism seriously. They take morality seriously. They take the idea that your life is more important to you than anybody else as wrong and evil. This is the morality that dominates the world. Now, this is a particular form it takes, which appeals to engineers and guilt-ridden millennials. But the fundamental is the same fundamental as the Christian idea of you must serve. You must give up all your possessions for the poor and follow Jesus. They don't take reason seriously because they don't apply it to morality. They've already accepted a morality. And then they pretend to apply reason to how to apply that morality. But the morality was chosen how? Ask an altruist why you should sacrifice. Ask an altruist why a child's life in Africa is equally valuable to you. Value to whom and for what? A value is to somebody. Why is a child in Africa equally valuable to you as your own child? It's obviously not. Nobody actually thinks that. Well, I mean, there's so many philosophical errors here. It places intrinsic value on all things. It doesn't, Ayn Rand says, for there to be a value out there, there has to be a valuer. Only the valuer gives the thing value. Something might be a value to me and not a value to you. I think it's Leonard Peikoff who gives the example of looking through a microscope. And you could have 3 different people looking through a microscope. And let's say in the microscope there is we've just discovered a cure for cancer. We've just discovered that this mRNA has managed to attack a cancer cell and destroy it. It's created a protein that destroys the cancer cell. And you're looking through the microscope. If you're a doctor, this represents your life work, a massive achievement. This is a huge value to you, not because it's going to be used on you, but it's because it's a combination of all your work. If you're a cancer patient, this is life or death. This has just saved your life. This is an unbelievable value. If you're just somebody off the street who knows nothing about science, it's meaningless. You look through the thing and it doesn't mean anything to you. St. Augustine looks at the slide. It's meaningless. Value to whom and for what? The child in Africa is a value to me, but a small value. He's a value because he's a human being with the potential that human beings have. But I have no relationship with him. He does not directly affect my life. I don't know him. And therefore, his value to me is small relative to my child, who has a massive value. He's mine. I created him. I've invested in him. I get joy from him every day. I interact with him. I have a relationship. So the child, my child, is much more valuable to me than the child in Africa. My neighbor's child is more valuable. Why? Well, A, because he lives in a free country. He's likely to become a productive adult. He's likely to trade with me in some capacity. I get to see him on a daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis, whatever. I enjoy his enthusiasm for life. I enjoy his playfulness. I get pleasure from him. Therefore, he's a value to me. So not all life is equally valuable to any particular human beings. Now, yes, from a moral perspective, an individual life is an end in itself. It doesn't mean you have the right to take it. You cannot have a right to take it, any more than somebody has a right to take yours. But from the perspective of helping them, from the perspective of interacting with them, there's a vast difference between a life that's next door and a life that's far away. But what they're rejecting, like the Christians reject, like all altruists reject, what they're rejecting is you, your life, the value of your life to you. The fact that you must exert significant effort to live, but not just to live. You must exert significant effort to live well, that life is rare, that life is rare and fragile. And even more fragile than life is happiness and success and being successful at living. And that requires resources. It requires time. It requires effort. It requires investment. It requires making money. It requires purchasing things. It requires material and spiritual stuff, values. It rejects Iran's rule for life, number one, which is just taken from Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff, but Iran's rule for life 101. Your life is it. Take your life seriously. Live. Live the best that you can live. Your moral responsibility is to you, to your life, to your happiness, to your flourishing, to your success as a human being, as a conceptual being. Live the best life that you can as a thinking being. Helping other people is not that important to living that successful life. Helping other people outside of the career you've chosen, obviously a doctor helps other people. A software engineer helps other people. And of course, what they ignore is, on a massive scale, the social, political, economic question of why is Africa poor? Why do they need help? How do we save all the children in Africa for once and for all? And the answer to that is capitalism. The answer to that is more self-interest. The answer to that is more people pursuing their values for themselves, creating more wealth. The answer to that is freedom. The answer to that is Africans embracing the value of individualism, embracing the morality of egoism, and embracing the political system of individual rights, capitalism. I mean, if you really want to be effective in helping human beings live the best life that you can live, then capitalism is the solution. Apollo Zeus asks, if you're being scientific about the investigation, right? Apollo Zeus asks, just checking in. What did I miss? So chicken or beef? No shortcuts, Apollo. You're going to have to go back and listen from the beginning, because it's not a simple answer. It depends. How many offsets you buy? Depends on your standard of value. It depends what? Well, no, chicken's not the answer. You want to eat, if you want to minimize suffering, you have to eat beef. God, I spent half an hour on this and you guys are still getting it wrong. See, this is hard. Now, I did this today to illustrate a couple of things. One is that altruism is alive and well. It's everywhere. Maybe we're not seeing people put themselves on crosses to die for humanity, but people are giving away 45% of their income. People are living by it. People feel guilty for not doing more of it. People are investing massive amount of resources figuring out whether they should eat chicken or beef, because which is more altruistic. So I did this just to illustrate that altruism is alive and well, sadly. It needs to be fought continuously. But also to show you the absurdity of it in the form of utilitarianism, how nutty and crazy it is to put dollar values on all these things and try to figure all this out. It's insane and absurd and nonsense. And that morality should be dictated by how much does offsetting a chicken cost versus how much is offsetting. Do we pay to offset the lives that we take of human beings? I mean, that's ridiculous. But yeah, utilitarians would argue that we should. Right? Human life is worth X. If to save one life, we have to kill 3. Maybe not. But if to save 10 lives to kill 3, maybe yes. That's utilitarianism. Now, some utilitarians have this thing, okay, we can't take a life. Other than that, everything, but you get the same thing. So it's a ridiculous, if you read that article by Scott Alexander, and I think he wrote it seriously. But if you read stuff like that and take it seriously, there's something wrong. I mean, the whole orientation of morality should be about how to live, not how to die, not how to allocate your resources, not how to give stuff, not how to sacrifice. It should be on how to live. What are the things I should do to make my life better? Not what are the things I should do to reduce suffering in the world. And then run the calculations through a supercomputer to figure out what I should do. But yet, utilitarianism dominates the world today. Most free market economists, including people like von Mises, were utilitarians at the end of the day. Most Austrian economists are utilitarians. Most people today, in one form or another, are utilitarians. It's a philosophy that it just doesn't make it doesn't make any sense. It's not morality. It's treat people as means, not to some end of what? And this is the thing about objectivism. This is the challenge about objectivism. We're asking people to upend their entire moral code. We're challenging the very premise of morality for everybody, other than maybe Aristotle. Rand is saying everything, basically everything you've thought about morality is wrong. Because you've turned morality upside down. Morality is not even about what you're talking about. Morality is about the values you choose to enhance your life, to guide your life, to make your life better, to survive, to thrive. And that the effective altruists or the normal altruists or the utilitarians or any of these other moral codes, they just miss, they don't get. And it's sad and it's a waste and it's a massive waste of resources. And the biggest resource that's wasted is the brain cells that have to go into these stupid calculations.
And to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize. I know this is difficult. Can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute. That man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it. And that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
All right, all right.
Now, may I define what my morality is?
All right.
Because this is merely an introduction. My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
May I?
All right, before we go on, reminder, please like the show. We've got 163 live listeners right now, 30 likes. That should be at least 100. I figure at least 100 of you actually like the show. Maybe there are like 60 of the Matthews out there who hate it. But at least the people who are liking it, you know, I want to see a thumbs up. There you go. Start liking it. I want to see that go to 100. All it takes is a click of a thing, whether you're looking at this. And you know, the likes matter. It's not an issue of my ego. It's an issue of the algorithm. The more you like something, the more the algorithm likes it. So, you know, and if you don't like the show, give it a thumbs down. Let's see your actual views being reflected in the likes. But if you like it, don't just sit there. Help get the show promoted. Of course, you should also share. And you can support the show at JeronBrookShow.com/support, or on Patreon or Subscribestar or Locals, and show your support for the work, for the value hopefully you're receiving from this. And of course, don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, even if you just come here to troll, or even if you're here like Matthew to defend Marx, then you should subscribe, because that way you'll know when to show up. You'll know what shows are on, when they're on. You'll get notified, right? So, yes, like, share, subscribe, support. Like, share, subscribe, support. There you go. Easy. Do one or all of those, please.